right. Hi, guys. Can everyone hear me? Yes. All right, perfect. Thank you all so much for coming. This is such an exciting event. I'm so excited to see all of you here. So my name is Fiolla. I'm the head of management operations at this school's AI club. So I'm very excited to present you all with the annual AI summit that we're doing. So good evening and welcome to the AI summit. So tonight is essentially all about exploring how AI is transforming literally everything, so from startups to global companies. Through the insights of incredible founders, engineers, and innovators who we're gonna have come and speak, and you get to hear a little piece of their lives and how AI is affecting the world around us. So before I get started though, I did want to give a special thank you to our sponsors. We have had some incredible help, including Ciocca Center has been an amazing sponsor and help to all of this. Jim and Supermicro, along with Fellows Fund, for making this possible. So let's give a huge round of applause for them. All right, so to kick us off, please join me in welcoming the president of Santa Clara University, Julie Sullivan.
Right. Thank you, Bella. Here, I'm just going to hold this. Thank you, Bella. Good afternoon. It's wonderful to see you here this afternoon. This is becoming a signature event here at Santa Clara University, and it's my pleasure to welcome you for the second year in a row, and I'll be back next year. So I want to talk about a couple of things. We are the Jesuit University in Silicon Valley. So what opportunities and what responsibilities does that place upon us? We're clearly, the Silicon Valley is the worldwide center of innovation. We all know that, and we're so blessed to be right here in the center of it. Santa Clara University is a university that is dedicated to preparing leaders and citizens of competence, conscience, and compassion who are committed to building a more just, humane, and sustainable world. And what about our students at Santa Clara University? What about the students that are here this afternoon? Our students are brilliant. I always tell people they're smart, but they're not nerds. They are creative, they are curious, they are innovative, and they are eager to be a part of making this a better world. They are eager to be on the cutting edge of whatever can lead to human flourishing, or whatever is the exciting new opportunities of tomorrow and how they can shape those opportunities. And through things like the great students we have, things like the AI Collaborate Club, things like the Ciocca Center, Santa Clara University was just ranked number 14 in the country for entrepreneurship. Because we want to be creating the new things that are going to make this a better world for everyone. Well, AI is a big thing. AI, generative AI, quantum computing, these are the leading edge of where we're seeing the technology innovation today. So what is Santa Clara University's responsibility to our students, given that? Well, we are not just seeking to create AI literacy. We are not just seeking to prepare our students to know how to accomplish certain tasks using AI. That is not going to be enough to lead to career success. That might be enough for me to survive, but I am not just starting my career. It won't be enough. Career success requires developing habits of mind that manifest durable skills across disciplines and reflect an ethical and a values framework. And for our students to do that, they must stay current with the AI evolution, or really revolution. They must stay current, while centering on the lasting skills and dispositions that will serve our students as AI eventually becomes something that maybe many of us can't imagine right now. So they have to understand where the wave is. What is the crest of that wave? But they also have to be developing the durable skills and the mindset that are going to allow them to see those opportunities, not just how to use the latest application. So ultimately, Santa Clara's responsibility is not just to educate students about how AI is and can be used, but it is to provide students with the opportunities to develop the skills, the dispositions, and the sense of urgency to be the leaders that are going to shape how AI is used. To be those that are going to be really leading what is the shape of that wave ultimately going to become. And to add their talents and energies to really being sure that whatever that shape is, that it does lead to human flourishing. That we are the leaders that shape this, what is really a momentous and existential change, in a way that we can look back on and say was good for humankind. So that's a big responsibility. But this Jesuit University in Silicon Valley, with these students and with the faculty and staff and other mentors you work with, we're up to that. Now it takes partners, and we're very grateful for the industry speakers that are here today, because they have a lot of things to do with their time. They are too shaping that wave. Yet they want to spend some time talking with you and helping keeping you on the leading edge of this revolution. So we're very grateful to them. We're very grateful to the AI Collaborate Club that has made this an annual event and has really used their own entrepreneurship and ingenuity to attract these speakers. And we're grateful to the Ciocca Center, our faculty, our staff, all of those who mentor these students. So I want to thank you for being here. I hope you enjoy the evening. I know you'll learn something. And go Broncos. Thank you.
Thank you, President Sullivan. That was an amazing intro. Thank you so much for being here. I know it means a lot. So to start the evening, we're going to dive into a foundational topic. So this is legal ethics in the age of AI. So our first speaker is Jeff, and he is a VP in Law and Policy Group and serves as the Director of Patents at Intel. So let's give him a huge round of applause, and let's welcome Mia as well, who's going to be our moderator.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Bella and President Sullivan. My name is Mia, and I'm happy to be here having this conversation with you, Jeff. You could also call this a fireside chat, and it will serve as a guide for students building with AI and who are interested in the legal industry in the coming years. Jeff, to get the ball rolling, how should students, particularly those interested in pursuing a law degree, think about AI to position themselves optimally for career acceleration?
Thank you all for having me here. Great question. Boy, there's a lot of prognostication about the end of the legal profession because of AI. And like a lot of things, I think its death is unlikely in the near term and in the long term. So what we've seen with AI in the legal profession is really, you need a lawyer in the loop is the quick way to think about it. AI systems can't do the critical thinking and the analysis and get things right to the extent you need to get rid of lawyers. I know Shakespeare and others will be disappointed by that, but I think it's the likely state of things for quite some time to come. So for students who are interested in this field, and I think many other fields, really, you should have some core depth and expertise. I think AI makes generalists a little bit less valuable because it's easier to reproduce and research general topics. But when you get to the super complex strategic work, very deep issues, and there's many areas of law that are complicated, from intellectual property, of course, to tax and export, just endless areas that get super complicated that will persist and need real humans to make those strategic decisions, steer the AI, use the AI as a tool. So become AI native, learn how to use it. You're going to kick butt over the people who don't, and try to get into something that's very specialized. And I'll give you an example of sort of a major change in the profession. So typically 10 years ago, tens of thousands of hours would be spent in document review in a big litigation. You produce millions of pages. We hire, young associate at modest rates of $500 an hour, and it costs a fortune, right? And now AI can really do that very basic legal work with a high degree of accuracy. Doesn't require a lot of specific training. New lawyers can do it. So those are the kinds of things that are becoming a little bit more commoditized and just mechanized with AI and workflow systems. But there's a lot that still needs to be done. So understand how the tools work, learn to use them, become the AI native lawyer, and you'll have a good future ahead of you.
Awesome. Great response. Getting into more of protecting AI ideas and concepts, what parts of an AI product can you actually protect? So code, model idea, data, or the way that it's actually used?
Yeah, this is a great question because AI is really different than a lot of different technologies that have come forward over the last 100 plus years. So for AI, you want massive data sets. Often you want a private massive data set. You want to do tons of math on it. And what you end up with is a set of numbers, right? Generative AI model is essentially a set of model weights, is a key output that you generate. And so data compilations are very hard to protect with copyright or other forms of IP. So you put all this work into it, and there's no real form of intellectual property that's strong. Mathematical algorithms, not patentable, not copyrightable. So you're kind of scratching your head on that one. And then a series of numbers stored in a computer is not patentable, not copyrightable either. So it really is a bit tricky to figure out what to do with AI. But don't lose hope. So there's plenty you can do. First, I'm a patent guy, so I'll start with that. But so this is not a new problem as to what computer-related inventions can be patented. I actually, when I was in law school, wrote an article called "Are Beauregard's Claims Really Valid?" And it was whether you could patent software sitting on a computer-readable medium or in a memory. And it came out that, of course, you can patent software. The question is, what is the software doing? And the software has to be having some technical advancement. And so you can imagine one really interesting case that came out was that a database became patentable because it had a certain structure. And it's not about the data in it. It's about an efficient new structure of a database that allows the computer to work better. And so that's patentable. In the AI era, so you could think about a case that just came out this last week. The new patent office director, John Squires, reversed a finding that a Google DeepMind patent was unpatentable. The patent was about taking one model and changing the weights slightly so that you could apply the model to a different application. So it's a more efficient way of creating a second model or a second model, modified model, without doing the full retraining. So that's an advancement of the technology in general. If you're trying to, say, use a computer to, find me the cheapest hotel, was the old version of this, and those all got shot down. And now the new version of this is using AI to, enter your business process or your common thing that's done by humans. That kind of thing isn't patentable, but if you're changing the way that the AI itself works, if you're making a piece of hardware that implements something that makes AI more efficient, that's all patentable. And then kind of, if you're using more generalized AI, you have to apply it to a very specific application, maybe preferably a machine, a robot or industrial machine. Using an AI to control something else that it is tied to an actual machine are some of the areas where you can think about getting patent protection. If you write source code, code is always copyrightable. There's limits to that. People can't copy your software. It's a pretty narrow right, and software keeps changing quite frequently. But you do have some protection around whatever computer code you do, and that is automatic when you create it. As long as you create it, we'll talk about probably human creation versus machine creation. But your model and your data compilations, there's no sui generis intellectual property right that fits those. So they're really just confidential information. So confidential information could be a trade secret if you take reasonable steps to keep it secret and have the right safeguards, et cetera. But it's pretty risky, right? If you lose it, or if somebody else independently comes up with the same thing, your trade secret is gone. So it's a little bit thinner on the models and the like, but there are some corners where you can patent. I think I'll leave it at there for now.
Awesome. Yeah, you answered all my questions about patents and copyrights. So we can move on to ethics. And this is a question inspired by Professor Kennedy. I don't know if she's here tonight, but she proposed which stakeholder interests are in conflict or potentially suggest an ethical divergence when it comes to protecting data sets or the copyright of AI outputs. And how are we seeing that potential conflict play out in the legal context?
Yeah, so this is kind of hard to miss. If you're interested in AI, there's been a lot of litigation around the push and pull of the various stakeholders. I put them into 3 or 4 categories, depending on how you look at it. First of all, of course, there's the content creators, artists, authors, anybody who's creating creative works. There's the AI model developers, we'll call them, the people who use a lot of those works to train and build their models and the like. There's a set of companies one step downstream from them that then use the models, and they would like to not have liability back to anybody further up the chain. They would like to not have product liability and other things, and they'd like to have low cost. And then there's society in general, and I don't know where to put society in general. Society in general doesn't come out on one side or the other. Society in general really needs balance, right? Because if we don't have incentives for authors and artists to create works, then society isn't going to be happy with that, with all the money going to the tech guys who are creating these models. So there's a need for balance. It's manifesting itself in a lot of litigation right now based on the training on the internet. And really, it's a matter of how much is who going to get paid to use the content, if anything. So we could go into that in more detail if you have any follow-up, but that's kind of the stakeholders and the push and pull.
Yeah, if we have time, I'd love to come back to that. But for now, I'm curious if there are any pre-law or law students that are here today in the audience. I'm sure there are a good amount. But for those individuals and anybody else who has a particular interest about going into the legal profession, what insight can you offer into your day-to-day life, particularly as someone who's based out of the Silicon Valley and is so forward-facing with the evolving technologies?
Yeah, it's an exciting time, I'd say. So business is moving faster than ever. I've been at Intel for 33 years, which is sort of unheard of in the Valley, especially. But the company, it's always changing. And really one of the things that you can hope for in your career is to have interesting work. And of course, probably more important than that is to work with great people. So Intel's, hired and retained a lot of great people despite all the ups and downs. And the work is just fascinating. 1 minute we're buying a bunch of companies, the next minute we're spinning them back out for half the price, or a little kick at my own company, but sometimes for more. So really think about getting into work that you're going to be interested in, because that's really made my career interesting. You can't understate the people aspect either. I mean, the number one reason people leave jobs is because they don't like their manager, not because of pay, not because of anything else. So get in with good people, get into a line of work. If you like fast pace moving, it's there. And if you like something a little bit slower, that's out there too. In terms of what AI is doing for us, a lot of the technologies are really in their infancy. I'm blessed to have like an internal software program that manages our patent assets. So it's given us a lot of flexibility to build AI into our workflows. And everybody talks about AI, and AI is obviously a slightly ambiguous term, but generally I think people are thinking of generative AI as being so changing of everything. And I'd say on top of the generative AI, there's been massive advances in how easy it is to create custom workflows. So we have everything happening electronically, from inventors submitting disclosure forms. We look up in HR who they are, where they live, fill out the forms, send them their honorariums automatically through finance. And just you can automate all these things in an actually deterministic way through databases which have accurate deterministic data. And I think that's really accelerated. It's getting easier to code things. So on top of AI, which is great for drafting language or creating pictures and the like, the ability of computers to quickly automate processes should not be underestimated. And I think that's putting pressure on kind of the more paralegal, administrative type jobs, and really allowing lawyers and other people to focus on the higher value tasks. So I really see business getting more efficient, more interesting. Again, you're getting rid of some of these things that you used to do. We used to have 100 people overseas helping administer our database, and now we have 3 or 4. The rest has been automated. So really things are becoming more automated. You got to embrace, both the ability to turn any sort of common work practice into just a computerized workflow. Get used to entering things into computers. A lot of lawyers, don't like to do this. I think even Salesforce, if you think of Salesforce.com, I always heard a lot of salespeople didn't want to enter all their contacts into the database, just try to keep it to yourself. That's all changing. Like everything gets into your systems, and it's incredibly powerful, incredibly efficient. So I think you're seeing productivity gains from both AI and all that other computer automation that's happening. It's pretty exciting. And I also just, on the more generative AI side, I feel like I have like a postgraduate student at my fingertips with the questions I can ask and the answers I can get. And it's hard to pinpoint what exactly I'm doing faster or better or different, but it's just kind of in my daily life in a really significant way that's hard to measure right now, but I think it's really substantial.
Yeah, it's a great response. I guess we can move on to national security and responsibility. The next question then would be, if an AI system causes harm, who truly is on the hook? Who's responsible? You could say who's liable? The model maker, the app builder. Like, there are so many different moving parts. Who would you say? Or are there numerous people, individuals, companies, parties that you could say should be held liable?
Yeah, this is kind of the Wild West a little bit, which is always exciting. It's great for lawyers when things are unclear. So there's a lot of ambiguity these days, which is good for lawyers. So I'll just sort of separate things into vertically integrated products, and then I think almost AI as a standalone product, like a chatbot, is almost its own separate thing. AI and generally computers are really just a component in a lot of products. So Tesla's the classic example, right? There's been lots of litigation over self-driving crashes and whose fault they are. So there's a number of efforts. Europe has actually gone ahead with some laws that increase the ability to hit different people in the value chain when AI is involved. I don't know that I'm a big fan of that because we have good product liability rules and laws and case law for centuries in this country on like when your Tesla hits another car or hits a person, God forbid, like what happens in that case? And it's a little bit more complicated, right, to tell if it was a defective design or if it was a user error, but we've been doing that for centuries. So in that more integrated product, I think it's a simpler question. You just use the end product and you look at it. And there's many examples of that, from medical to cars and anywhere. Even you can go pre-AI where computer technology was involved. There could be liability for faulty technology. In the chatbot space, I think it's like, what is a chatbot? Is that a product? And there's not much law on this at this point in time. Unfortunately, like some of the law that's evolving is pretty depressing because it's coming from cases where people have, committed harm to themselves based on interactions with the chatbot. It's looking like that chatbot could be treated as a product. And there's, again, you can go back to product liability laws. If there's something inherently wrong with the design, product liability would apply in that case. And I think it's going to be, there's no real like national laws here in the US that give you any different result. Some states, Colorado and California, are passing some legislation that go to some of these issues, which is not great because it makes it hard for companies to design something to a number of different areas. But so that's an intriguing one. I think generally, I think if I was in favor of any regulation, it would be to try to get at the more like catastrophic AI, long tail scenarios where something really bad happens, because everything's changing so fast. Until we establish that like normal product liability laws don't work for chatbots and for Teslas and for everything else, we really don't have the legislative acumen to get ahead of and come up with good rules and get them through whatever legislative body. And then by the time that's done, it may be obsolete. So in any case, so that may be a long answer. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting area. I generally think, legislating too far ahead kind of inhibits the technology. So we ought to be careful with it and see if our existing laws can handle it. Yeah. Not for AI particularly, because I think it's just products cases. So you could get, I think the other, just the other good example that maybe is interesting to people is there's a lot of talk about bias in models and the like, and there's, potentially ethical questions. But we have like a whole set of discrimination laws, right? So we can use the existing laws to try to get at that, and maybe at some point they won't do it, but so several of the discrimination cases, I think, are proceeding just based on the law we have, and I'm not convinced we need to do more.
Got it. Okay. I guess to keep things rolling, we can move on to safety and regulation on a more international stage. So I'm curious, what levels of AI regulations should be operatable in the legal industry? You kind of touched on this, but I know it can perhaps be interpreted in different ways based on the case or the specifics of what you're dealing with.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be inevitable that like US and Europe have different regulations. I think within the United States, I'm more in favor of kind of federal legislation around AI so that companies don't have to try to comply with a lot of different laws. The Colorado law that passed had some reporting requirements and things that are difficult to say how they pay off, right? If you're creating a bureaucracy that captures information, obviously bringing that information forth is valuable, but it's not the same as telling people, hey, you can design a product as long as it does A, B, and C, and maybe you can't design a product if it does D, E, and F. So from a letting the market move quickly perspective, I believe in more of a market that has clear things that you can do, things that you can't do. Obviously, there might be some reporting here and there, but focusing more on consistent, clear rules of the road where companies can build products out. So there's not much in the U.S. Biden had an executive order that was rescinded, so that's gone. And there's a few experiments among the states, which we'll see. We'll see how it goes, but it generally makes things worse for startups, right? I mean, I think the Metas and Microsofts of the world have a lot of lawyers. They can figure it out. Obviously, they might rather not, but even there's this concept of the captured regulated state, and these big companies, to some degree, can become a competitive advantage if you have too much regulation that makes it hard for startups to operate and succeed. So let's keep it consistent. Europe's got a little bit more of, these things are phasing in. There's transparency requirements. They've created tiers of AI that have different levels of risk, and there's different obligations depending on what tier you fit in. So that's one way to do it. I think it's way too early to tell what's going to be successful and what's not.
Yeah, we'll see. The next, you said 3 years should be really interesting. Okay, I guess if you could put one safety metric, I know there are numerous. If you could put one safety metric on every AI product, what would it be and why?
I love this question because we often at work, it's like, all right, I need a metric for this. And it's like, oh, no, there's no one metric for that. So you suggested you're going to ask for one metric, and I kind of thought this is just like work. So here's my cunning answer. If I had to put one metric on AI, I think it would be the brand of the company that produces it, because really, AI is a black box, and what's coming out of it, there's no way to have an explanation to the public of it that's really sticky, i.e. it's not changing every week, meaningful to the public. What kind of disclaimers are you going to put? Is this like a 1 to 10 on the level of safety? I think it's going to have to be do we trust the companies that are coming out with these AI products? And obviously, they're going to have to earn their reputation and keep their reputation through building reliable products. But if you don't narrow me down to this specific application, the best I can come up with is you got to earn your trust. You got to really think about that as a company, as a person. Trust is an incredibly valuable asset that you have. So earn it and take care of it if you have it.
Awesome insight. And to close, we already kind of talked about action steps that students here can take today to utilize both AI and perhaps have an intersection within the legal industry. But outside of AI, how can students accelerate their career and steps that you would encourage them to take once they leave the summit?
Yeah, good question. Well, I'm glad you're all here. You've taken step one. I think step one is to always be curious, right? I mean, there's nothing more than having that aptitude. If you don't have the aptitude, you want to learn, you want to be on the cutting edge. You know, you don't have to be a CEO someday to be successful, but you probably have to be curious, work hard, and want to know something, want to get somewhere. So I think it all starts with being curious, be adaptable. I think the one thing that I referred to just briefly, you know, our intellectual property laws are designed to reward creativity and ingenuity. You know, you need creativity to get a copyright. You need ingenuity to get a patent. And you have to have that creativity and ingenuity in your life. You have to want to invent things, solve problems. So think about being a creator and whatever that means in your domain. Think about how windy it is. Think about how you can, and if you're not into computers and computer design and all that, I've got a daughter who's a college student who's into molecular biology, and she doesn't listen to me, but I keep telling her, make sure you're understanding the basic ways that computers are changing your field. You know, in biology, they're automating experiments. They're taking way more data points based on experiments conducted by robots, you know, across a set of data points. And now AI can kind of fill in a large empty space of solutions based on a limited set of data points. So you might be doing, you know, the numbers are probably completely wrong. You might be doing 1,000 experiments, but you can infer the results of 1,000,000 out of it now with today's computing techniques. So, and you know, it used to be you have to be a computer programmer to figure this stuff out. By the time you all get out of school, even a few years from now, all the user interfaces are just becoming super simple. So understand this tool that you will have at your disposal and how you can use it in whatever you're doing, because it's super powerful. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, well, those are some great thoughts. Thank you, Jeff, for coming out today. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone here learned a lot. And I'm excited to see what the rest of the summit has in store for tonight. Let's give Jeff a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna do a few questions. So anybody that wants to ask questions, raise your hand and I'll come over with the mic and then you're able to ask him questions.
Hi, Mr. Draeger. I'm a current law student at SCU, and one of the things that's kind of brought up a lot within the context of legal practice and AI use is hallucinated like creations and stuff like that, or hallucinated cases and stuff like that. Do you ever think that problem will be directly addressed? And if so, how do you think that problem would be addressed in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. I see it, and it's a big problem because even if you're not citing cases, you get asking AI. We were talking earlier about even economics or what have you. AI is really good at coming up with a convincing looking answer. And it's very prolific. So you get tons and tons of information. You can ask it to write a patent application and it looks pretty good. But if you don't have the expertise to weed out whether that's actually accurate or not, it's a problem. The citations problem is the easy one. So we're working on that ourselves internally. We do what we call like claim charting, where you'll take a patent, you'll find an infringer, and you create a chart of how the patent claims, are met by whatever product's infringing. And so you could get a LLM to do that, and it takes out quotes or what have you. So you can have a deterministic program go back and search through the source material and check if it's actually a citation. So that where you're actually checking for citations, that's a very solvable problem. It's not universally solved, but that's easy. It's the sort of more subtly wrong answers that are trickier. And I think that's always going to be a problem. And whenever you're almost inventing a legal theory or an argument every time you have a new case. So there may not be a right answer, but the LLM may go a suboptimal way. So it may be per se wrong, but it may just not be optimal. And the trick, I think, for people who are younger in their careers is if they haven't learned to, distinguish those, they've got to have some mentor, or there's got to be some way to distinguish the subtle shades of accurate and not good enough. But the pure citation thing is, first of all, inexcusable. If nobody's heard this, it's almost comical. Like some lawyers submit briefs to judges and they have hallucinated cases in them and they actually get sanctioned. So anyways, there's hope for that one, but we'll have to keep working on it. What we do a lot is LLMs are very good at challenging themselves. So it's like, gives you an answer. Well, what are the counter arguments to that? Okay, well, how would I overcome those counter arguments? Like your law professor taught you how to do this. So just become a law professor and keep poking it. And while you wither away and start crying at a certain point in your lecture, the LLM will keep going as long as you keep poking it. So that's the trick there. I got another question. Oh.
Question? All right, we'll do one more little question.
Thank you. I'll be fast, I promise. Hello, my name is Kaylee Benson. I'm also a 2L at Santa Clara University, interested in patents. You mentioned earlier about Director John Squires has made it clear that AI will be more patentable from here on in the future. There's also a policy at the USPTO of issuing discretionary denials more often than was issued in the past. Have either of these two trends changed the way you manage patent portfolios at Intel?
Yeah, it's affected our litigation docket, I would say. So for everybody, there's a procedure to challenge patents at the Patent Office, and it's become a lot less available because the Patent Office is turning many more down. It's better for patent holders to not have those challenges, so it doesn't affect so much the way we're creating the patents, but the way we defend a case when we're in court, getting sued when we're on the defendant side. It's a big challenge if you don't have the Patent Office. Patent examiners have 19 hours on average to decide whether to grant a monopoly on an invention. And they have pretty rudimentary tools, and you end up litigating for millions and millions of dollars, and you have maybe a small amount of time in front of a jury to assess invalidity of the patent. So it's really helpful to have a more expert body look at it. And when that goes away, it's not a good thing if you're a defendant. So yeah, it's a big change. The patentability increase of AI inventions, I think, is good, but there's fundamental problems with 101 that can't be overcome by the Patent Office. And there's the PIRA Act, Patent Eligibility Reform Act, is floating around Congress again, which would kind of get rid of the basic challenge to a lot of AI patents. And we'll see where that goes. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Let's give a huge round of applause.
Thank you so much.
All right, so now we're gonna dive in to our next panel. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Mia. That was awesome. So our next panel is going to be the Young Stars. So this is going to be moderated by Sean Wu. And for this next panel, it really captures the spirit of the next generation of AI builders. So as you can see, these are all pretty, young men that are going to come up here and tell you guys about their story and how they're using AI in the world around us. So let's give a huge round of applause and warm welcome.
Just gonna take this on, I guess. Hey everybody.
Is yours work? Okay, awesome. Okay, hey guys, I'm Sean, president of this club, AI Collaborate. Really fortunate to have great caliber speakers today. These are all kind of, mentors at different stages of my life and still are in kind of various aspects. So, extremely, honored and, grateful to have had them. And so I think I'll let you guys kind of do your own introductions. So run through some questions, and then if someone can remind me of if there's when there's about 10 minutes left in the end, and we can have awesome, thank you, Gordon. So I guess first question is, could each of you kind of briefly share your origin story and then how you got into programming, tech, business, or whatnot, and a pivotal moment early on that kind of brought you into that? So.
Well, thank you, Sean, for having us, and it's awesome to be back at Santa Clara. I was a student here, so this building wasn't actually really here, so I'm jealous of all of you to experience it. My story kind of began in high school. I was really wanting to learn programming, but there wasn't really a lot of opportunity to actually learn it in school. There wasn't a class really for it. And so I was in the Claremont area. It's in south, so it's east of Pasadena, if you kind of know where that is in Southern California. And I actually visited a college campus there, because there's a lot of college campuses there, to learn the initial bit of programming, because I was just really wanting to learn it. And that's kind of how I got my start. I don't know how I would have really fully done it without that. Once I kind of had a couple months of learning that, then I really started my own journey of self-learning. And I think something about programming, it fits much more of a format for learning on the internet or kind of self-driven learning. And was really, wanting to do products, and was really, interested in learning more about how computers worked and about technology in general. And in college, kept doing that here at Santa Clara. And that's when I discovered GPT-2. And that kind of got me in the whole generative AI thing in around 2020, 2021. And I was obsessing over it. I was going around telling everybody about it. But nobody totally seemed to get it yet. And I reached out to some people at OpenAI, and I was like, this is gonna change the world. Please let me do something with you. Let me help you in any way, shape, or form. And that's how I kind of began my journey in the whole AI world. And so I began as a contractor while I was still at Santa Clara University, and got to see ChatGPT get built behind the scenes. Got to collaborate with researchers and work on ChatGPT. At the time, I was kind of jealous because all the cool people were working on GPT-4, but got to do that. And then did some different companies here and there. Most of them failed, but I've had some serial success. So that's my story. I mean, now still doing startups, did Y Combinator most recently. Yeah, super excited to meet any of you. Come talk to me after if you are getting into AI or building or anything like that, because I can give a lot of advice on how to do some of that or get into that. Because there's a lot of doors that are open. It just took me, reaching out to these people, and then ended up there. So that's my story.
Yeah, so is this on? Test. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm Blake. For my story, I'll have to take you back to COVID. So I was a freshman in high school. Online school, burnt out teachers. I was really, really bored. So at the time, I heard about this thing called a product agency. And all that is you go into a business, you learn about their problem, you solve it, and then you build sort of a product internally. So just through a mentor, I started building products. We scaled that agency up in high school to about $1 million ARR with just a team of 4. And that was quite literally just going into a company, learning what do you need, X to Y. Okay, if we can do Y, how much is that worth to you? Can we build that? What are the resources? Build it. And then you just execute that with other companies. And so over time, we started getting more and more clients in construction. And so we're building, someone was going into Albuquerque. They had $500 million in projects they needed to do that. We built solutions for that. We ended up learning our space pretty well. And then after, some success there, we went all in on the industry of construction to build AI that actually automates all of construction estimating. So I guess a lesson I could throw out there is, get into something that you enjoy. And then naturally, if you solve problems, you'll figure out the biggest problem you can solve. Then you can just go straight all into that. So that's my thing.
Hey everybody, I'm Carter. Some of you might know me as Baxate online. I think that I got my intro to programming honestly through Minecraft when I was 11 or 12, and I just loved Redstone, and my dad was a computer engineer, and I learned that I could make AND gates and NOR gates and XOR gates in Redstone, and just loved building contraptions in Minecraft. And really in 6th grade, I was like, when I grow up, I want to be a computer engineer as well. I went to Georgia Tech and I studied computer engineering, and I realized I don't like debugging hardware. Why is my little LED not lighting up? That's very frustrating. And so I leaned pretty heavily into the software side, and I found that I really enjoyed that. I also grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it was there that I had a childhood Arabic tutor named Nader. And after I graduated from Georgia Tech, I came to the Bay Area and I started as a software engineer. And about a year in, I had been promoted, and I was, kind of wondering what's next for me. Is it the next promotion? Is it the next, do I want my manager's job? And the answer, at least at the current firm that I was at, was no. And Nader, my childhood Arabic tutor from Albuquerque, called me and he said, I'm working on a really cool startup called Brev. And I ended up joining Brev as the first hire. And one of my favorite classes in college was machine learning, but that was, kind of pre-transformers. It was very much a deep learning and deep neural networks class, but I still found the math really fascinating. And I realized that I loved building dev tools. I started making content when I moved to San Francisco, and so I had a knack for that. And so I was able to provide a lot of value to Brev, which was then subsequently acquired by NVIDIA last July, which is where I now am at. And I think that, you asked, Sean, what's a pivotal moment? I wouldn't have known it at the time, right? But it was meeting Nader. It was deciding to go to Georgia Tech. It was answering that phone call. I think that oftentimes the pivotal moments, I think there's many series of them that you can look back and say, this was actually the thing that changed my trajectory. But it's not something that you are hunting out, looking for the right person at the right time. It's putting yourself in as many situations as possible where those might happen. Sometimes you go to a networking event and it's a dud. Sometimes you're at a coffee shop and you're working on something cool and somebody sits next to you and they're working on something cool and you strike up a conversation and that becomes your future co-founder. So just try and put yourself in as many areas where luck can strike. Those will become the pivotal moments, but don't go out searching for them because oftentimes you'll spend a lot of time aimlessly looking.
All very great insights. And I guess moving on, also just as we had about 20 questions on a doc. So let's try to get through as many as we can while we're up here. But yeah, that was awesome.
I guess another question is, what were your biggest fears, doubts, or challenges when you first started building, whether that's in college, in early jobs, or side projects, and how did you overcome them? I think, Blake, you were very interested in this question, so.
So yeah, kind of like, I would say if you think about the core fear that happens when you start something new, it's just, I'm sacrificing my biggest resource, which is time, and what am I gonna get out of it? So I think the biggest way to like demystify that fear is to figure out what are you gonna get out of it. And so the way I like to apply that is everything can be built within a funnel. So whether that's getting clients, whether that's getting recruits, whether that's getting funding, you can sort of use like a probability distribution formula to understand this many cold calls reaches this many people to get this many meetings, and 1 in 3 meetings turn to a proposal, and that comes to a sale. And as long as you understand those numbers, whether it's whatever you do, you can understand where the inputs get you to output, and then that kind of demystifies the fear of losing your time. Because at the end of the day, you're scared of losing your time, nothing else. So if you can at least use math to like prove to yourself you're not wasting it, at least that's what I did, you won't have that fear anymore.
Yeah, I think my fears were ones that probably everybody feels to some degree, and I've since learned that it's actually somewhat of a strength. I think imposter syndrome is no stranger to college students, and I still am wondering now, am I qualified for this role at NVIDIA? Was I qualified at Brev as the first hire? I'd never built a startup before. And I think that there's, you don't want to be so nervous to never make any moves. And I think to what Blake was saying, a really easy way to at least dissuade some fear is, if I mess up, what happens? And the answer is, you'll probably wake up tomorrow, you'll probably still have more time to do other things, and you probably learn some lessons along the way. But if you have the opposite, which is no imposter syndrome, then you're probably a bit overconfident. And if you feel like in every single room that you walk into, you are purely qualified to attack everything that you'll encounter, then either you're wrong and people can tell, or you're not learning, you're not growing, you're not challenging yourself at all. And so the fears for me is still to this day is, am I qualified to tackle the problems that are out in front of me? But I can look on my history now. I've built up a series of wins to where I can at least have some confidence. I've tackled other things before, and I expect to continue stacking on those wins and continuing to feel unprepared for every situation that I walk into.
I think probably something similar for me. I don't know if I have something totally insightful here, but I'd say that, I didn't feel like I was really like a good programmer, or that I was really like had anything like of an edge or was necessarily sharp. But I knew like I was really like interested in this, and I wanted to keep chasing it, and I kind of would just keep failing forward and just learn to kind of laugh about it. And I don't know, I have like a funny, I think, way of looking at just trying rather than really thinking very much before I go into it. And I think that's really helped me.
It's awesome. Kind of going off of that, a lot of times it's kind of difficult to tell whether you're making progress or not until you kind of reach or like hit a certain level of, validation, whether that's external, internal, whether there are metrics or not. So actually, for all of you guys that have, kind of navigated some uncertain circumstances, what are some kind of leading indicators you track, whether that's like metrics, behaviors, to know that you're making progress rather than lagging signals? And in addition to that, how would you define success at different stages, whether you're a student, whether you're early career, if you're a founder, and has that definition kind of evolved for you over time?
I can start. So I think, I was somebody who maybe didn't have a lot of internal confidence, and so I borrowed from external measures almost entirely until I got to Brev, to be completely honest with you. You can look at your GPA, you can look at the school you got into, you can look at the job you got out of college, you can look at the salary you got at that job, you can look at the title you got at that job. And then I show up on Brev day one, and they say, you have some background in distributed systems. And I say, yeah, I do. And they say, okay, open up the AWS console. And I see a $300,000 unpaid AWS bill. And I go, okay. And they say, we're not collecting revenue, go fix it. And I say, well, how do I fix it? And they go, I don't know. That's why we hired you. And there was nothing, I mean, I could make that number go down, but apart from that, I don't know if I'm, there's no report 6 months in, am I doing a good job? Now I'm at a startup that nobody knows or cares about at the time, so I can't go and tell people I'm working at this really cool company. And from then, it's like, okay, in this nebulous zone, I do think it's important to find a couple anchors that you can measure yourself against, but hopefully not vanity metrics. And that was the biggest thing that I learned, was that if I can write it down or tell somebody at a cocktail party, this is why I'm successful, then that could go away. And does your self-worth go away? Does your confidence go away if all of those things were removed? And hopefully the answer is no. But then you start to build, hopefully, the more internal things. They're a bit more nuanced, so I can't even tell you, oh, success is defined by, again, salary, pedigree, title, or even, having self-confidence, because that's vague as well. But the ability to know that, again, I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and I'm going to try my best and probably make really meaningful progress on the problems that I have set out for me is enough that I know now that you place me in almost any room, and through trial and error and probably a lot of messing up, I will provide value to that context. And so success as a student, as a individual, as a startup founder, it's not how much you raise, it's not how many people you hire, it's not the GPA you got in school. It really is something that you have to kind of find on your own, to where, again, new situation, new problems. Do you feel like you're equipped? Do you have the tools on your tool belt to go to solve that? That's how I would define success.
Absolutely. Yeah, like just to add on to that, kind of maybe a formula you could use to frame this. So our startup's called SubHub, and one of our advisors was actually the previous CFO at General Electric. And he's taught me a really, really great lesson to kind of sift through all that information and get to what's clear and help you understand what traction means. It's called leading and lagging indicators. And just to use an analogy for running, because I was a runner. Let's say you want to run a marathon at 3 hours, and you know yourself, you know your system, you know how you get better. You set these different dates that are input indicators. So did I do this? And it's all input, so it's in your control. And as long as you sort of hit the green or red light there, you hit all of those. It's a way so you can sort of predict an output based off the intuitive inputs will lead to that output. And I like that thought experiment because it makes it feel more in your control, because when you have big goals, you have no idea if you're going to actually reach them. But the best you can do is understand what inputs go into reaching them. And a lot of times, if you actually just sit down for 20 minutes with a notepad, you can genuinely figure that out. And that's what no one does. They just don't sit at a wall and think. And I think that's the biggest thing that has, gotten me out of my, little troughs. So, yeah.
I feel like nobody knows what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And everyone's figuring it out like in real time. I remember each time like they say, don't meet your heroes. Each time I met somebody in like a large position, I'd ask them, what do you think is gonna happen in like a month from now? And they'd be like, I don't know. I'm just kind of looking the next couple steps ahead of me, and feel like sometimes it's very easy to, for me at least, I'd focus on one set of skills that I wanted to maximize, and that was a lot of times like hard skills. But then when I actually got into different situations, working on things, I saw that really the soft skills would really come in more, and you would just see that it's much more complex. There's not just a silver bullet for defining success or knowing what to do or, knowing the right thing to do at any moment. So I'd say definitely my definition of success has changed over time. Like you said, I think it's like something you set for yourself. But I also think, leading with your kind of soft skills is like a really good way to know what the right thing to do is, rather than just going after something like, high salary or something like a metric like that.
A lot of this actually resonates. Our club is actually only about 2.5 years old. It was founded by someone who knew who didn't know anything about AI. It's grown. It's certainly grown. And to echo what a lot of them said, none of us kind of knew what we were doing, especially about a year ago when we first started this. So if I think for many of you today, I hope you guys can really take away that it's okay to not have shit. It's okay to not have things figured out. and just kind of keep going step after step. Nobody knows what they're doing. And you'll go somewhere. But yeah, I guess then like for a lot of students out there, they're kind of juggling classes, different clubs, exploring their interests, potentially even like relationships, maintaining their social circles, all of these things. So I guess for you guys, how do you kind of balance that? How do you balance, classwork, especially if you guys still remember, versus trying to figure out clubs or like doing kind of deeper side projects, startups focusing on academics or, full-time roles, part-time roles, applying for internships. So.
Yeah, well, I think out of everyone, I was the most recent student, youngest here, so I guess it's more fresh in my brain. So when I came to Santa Clara, I was running D1 on the cross-country team, a distance relationship, had a business, and was doing school. So that's a lot of hours of working. And the biggest thing that was like kind of the golden nugget that I always learned was segment it into blocks. Like if you can get all night classes, and then if you can do all your running in the morning, if you're calling your girlfriend before you go to sleep, girlfriend, boyfriend, before you're going to sleep, then you have all normal day to do your work. It's all about segmenting. If you have a fractional window of you're trying to do that, trying to do this, it just causes for burnout, headaches. I don't suggest it. So that would be like kind of my take on that.
I agree with that. I'm not somebody who honestly did a lot in the startup or building outside of classes, but I was in a fraternity and I focused on my social circle a lot and really enjoying the college experience. I think that is one of the best things you can do while you're here. You can continue to learn and you will continue to learn outside of it, once you leave Santa Clara, but the college experience is something that is really special. And to echo what Blake said, I'm a big believer in Parkinson's law, which states that the work fills the time allotted for its completion. And by constraining yourself a bit more than you think you're capable of, you will get a lot more done than if you said, I'm gonna study for the next 4 hours, make it 2, and you'll get almost probably 95% of the way there than you would in 4 in 2, knowing that you have less time to be able to do that. Time management's a skill that'll serve you after, and there's no better place to learn it than while in school and trying to juggle all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, in school, in college, I was really like yearning for startup stuff and meeting other builders. And I think if I could go back in time, I would tell myself, just chill out a little bit and just enjoy college. And I definitely, think there's like a lot of value to the serendipity of life. I find myself like a creative person, and I think a lot of the best work I've done is when I, let myself stray away from just doing everything and optimizing every single thing in my life as much as possible. And there are times for that where you need to be in like athlete mode and you're doing a lot and you need to hit your goals. But I also think it's good to like lay off the gas a little bit and see where life takes you.
Awesome. I think we've had a lot of kind of like general advice here the past kind of 20 minutes. If we could get a little bit more technical, since this is an AI summit. And this might be more, I think first for Carter and Lucas, and then Blake, if you could offer your startup perspective, that'd be awesome. But I guess in kind of applying AI to these complex real world domains from what you guys have seen, like construction, enterprise workflows, and various, I know you were at a robotics conference just now, there's all sorts of things going on there. So what's kind of been the hardest part that you guys have seen? Is it the data, the user behavior, the infrastructure, things?
I mean, all of the above. I would say, honestly, the most difficult that I've seen is the actual application of it. I think that so many people see the world as the systems that have already been created and the workflows that have already been created. And what this group is poised to do that's different from, in industry is sort of reinventing problems, how they should be solved when we have these new tools available, these new building blocks that you can put into a different order that then actually completely change the experience. The example I'll give is something very simple like ChatGPT. And if you look at how your mom or dad uses ChatGPT, it's probably very different than how you use it. They'll use it more like Google, like a search engine. And you probably understand a bit more how to get how to get more out of it. Now expand that to where you have, not just the LLM itself, but something like an agent or RAG systems where it can access data or synthetic data. Can you create new data to augment where there are pitfalls in data, which is a very real problem? And looking at the industries that are a little bit older, a little bit sleepier, maybe like construction, is where I think there is a lot of opportunity to say, hey, what if we, from first principles, attack this with the new tools that we have available? And if you, instead of saying, hey, I can make your life 10% better, you say, hey, I made something that was so painfully for you, go away entirely. That's where the real value is.
Yeah, I mean, my 2 cents on that would be like, I think you're going to build your skill sets around what the business is. And what I mean by that is if you're able to build, say, an application off of like OpenAI and you can get the product out soon, you're going to have to get really, really, really good at sales, distribution, things like that. Whereas the alternative, like in our business venture, blueprints have never been shown to an out-of-box like VLM before. So like it has no idea what to do with blueprints for construction. So we're in an application that's going to be very, very heavy on the tech side and hard to build. So obviously you're going to put all your resources into tech if you're going into a business like that. Whereas if you're going to a business, you can get a product out sooner, put more of your resources and skill sets into that, like distribution, sales, those things. So I'd say like that was a mistake I made at a really early age. I just built skills because I wanted to, not necessarily that it had an impact on the business. Find your highest leverage skill set that aligns with your venture and then double down on it and double down and double down.
Yeah, I mean, it totally depends on the context. Like if you're doing like consumer AI product or something in enterprise. From my experience in doing enterprise, I have like this company that I helped found does like agents for enterprise use cases. So this like agentic workflows you may have heard about. And what I have seen from doing a lot of those projects is that you first challenge is getting the other like team or company to even understand that any of this is even possible. Like they are like, what are you, this can't even be possible. We're like, no, we promise you, we can make this. So that's the first step. But then the second is like understanding their business and what they do. Because a lot of the stuff that we would be working on, it's from a completely different industry or world that I have no experience in. And so then we would get to the part of actually figuring out what's a workflow that we can have an AI do that still fits into the company's like operational workflow that they are doing. And if you're gonna require them to change their workflow, which a lot of times you do, you wanna like restrict that as much as possible. It's almost like a company is like an immune system, and the second that you go in and you're like trying to change, it like attacks you. And so I think that's the hardest part, is the actual people side of it, because when someone would say to us, can you make a system that does X, Y, and Z? We're like, yes, but how do we actually give this to a company where they are integrating it into their workflow? And that like change management is actually like super, super hard and complicated. So I think there's actually a lot of opportunities in people doing enterprise type products, but then when they reimagine it from like, first principles, they maybe go after a startup. So like if you were gonna do something in, content marketing, for example, go after a company that doesn't even have a content marketing team yet. Then you can sort of start to really reimagine the workflow from scratch.
Thank you. A lot of startup heavy topics today. And I guess, having you guys having been on kind of both sides of kind of, recruiting and also hiring, would love to get you guys' advice on, for students, how do we get an internship? How do we get a job? That sort of things.
So it's no secret that the job market is a little bit tough right now. If you're studying CS, it's okay to call the balls and strikes and call the field as it is. And If you were, graduating in 2019 and you had a pulse and could type on a keyboard, you could go work at Google, right? And that's no longer true. But there are still a lot of ways to differentiate yourself. The boring stuff obviously makes sense. References, getting referrals, getting into that system through some back channel obviously is incredibly valuable. But I think one of the biggest ways, whether you're looking to work at a startup or looking to work at a company, you have to understand that they are taking a risk by hiring you. That risk is financial, but arguably bigger is that risk is the time that they're investing into you to hopefully make you efficacious at your job. How can you de-risk yourself and prove that up front? I'm sitting on the panel with Sean Wu. Sean Wu personally won 2, 3 of our hackathons. And
what a beast.
And so we were running these hackathons and this kid kept showing up and winning. And at the time he didn't even think he wanted to, work at NVIDIA or get an internship. And now we are—
That's false. That was my dream company.
Well, now we were clamoring for this kid because he not only was winning our hackathons, he was building on our tech, and then he was emailing us after the fact saying, I found a bug. Can you go fix this? Because it's stopping me from continuing my project. And so he had entirely de-risked himself because now we know if we bring this kid on, we know he's got the technical chops, we know he's going to make our products better. And it made the decision so easy for us that we even hired him as like an off-cycle intern when we weren't even hiring interns. Now that's an extreme example, but find ways to prove that you can provide value to, again, make that risk of the company saying, the resume looks all right and she has a decent GPA, but we don't know if they're actually going to provide value. How can you show that up front?
100%. My advice would be meet a lot of people. Every single person we hire, the first thing we tell them, whether they're a salesperson or a tech person, volume negates luck. And somewhere out there's some magical universal percentage of what are the chances you're going to get hired if you meet this many people. Whatever that percentage is, whether it's 1% or 10%, if you just meet more and more people, again, I'm just stressing the inputs, that's all I've ever learned. If you just meet more people and you can go figure out, where to meet those people, because it's pretty easy, you just go online, you'll find them. Just time over time, just volume negates luck. So that's what I always try to hammer in.
A cool worldview, you see through probabilities. I don't know if I have something super nuanced here. I mean, I've only worked at OpenAI. That was really the only real job that I had. That experience, I think, was just finding that I really liked generative AI and was really, really excited about it. And then I was like, let me go just tell them how excited I am about it, and also what I was making, right? I was making all these things. And so I was like, look, I made an AI tutor. Look, I made a thing that can translate from this language to this language using your model. And so I just kept getting in their face, showing them, look at this thing that I did, but out of like excitement. And then I just sort of fell into it. And so maybe there's something to take away from that if you have something you really like to do and you're just naturally super into doing that. Maybe there's a way to, line that up with future opportunity by expressing how much you like it and how much you know about it.
I'll give one more really tangible piece of advice. Become an AI native. What I mean by that is use the tools and use them a lot. I understand there's a little bit, especially if you're studying computer science, it can kind of feel like cheating in a way. Definitely don't pass AI code off as your own, but become a weapon with Cursor, Claude Code, Replit, V0, all of these tools, both no code, low code, all of them, because whether enterprises realize it or not, I can tell you from an enterprise sense, we do. We are going to be so hungry for the people who understand how to get the most productivity out of these things. And that is something that most people who've been in their careers for 15, 20 years are going to be really slow at adopting. You guys can come out of the gate basically as experts on them because we've had the tools as long as you have had them.
Absolutely. Add a 3 seconds piece to that. We give take-homes before every hire, and the number one biggest green flag ever is you basically vibe coded the entire first thing, and then you refined it. And because that is leading into what will be a talent, right? You're just going to throw it all out there. It's going to do the heavy lifting, and then you're going to use your human elements to refine. I think that's where it's going. So it's a green flag.
Yeah, awesome. Speaking of that, we actually running a NVIDIA hackathon on Monday here at Santa Clara University, 10 to 2 p.m. Feel free to, it's going to be on our email list, so if you're signed up for that, that's awesome. We'll send an email blast out in the end, but it's going to be a lot of vibe coding. It's only going to be 2 hours, so really you got to use AI tools. And so, even if you didn't have much experience, just put in something, I don't know.
Definitely come. I'll be hosting.
He will be
Please
hosting.
Come.
He will be hosting. Yeah. And I guess one of the later questions, we kind of spoke a little bit about like kind of what kids should be learning, especially being AI native in this day and age. I think would love kind of you guys' perspective on what sorts of habits kids should be cultivating right now, which and also like what sort of knowledge, what should they be learning, how should they be acting, what should they be practicing to kind of prepare for this future, and not just programmers, for just students in general.
I guess I can start again. I'll start with the soft skills, which Blake mentioned. I think that those have always been important. And I think we entered a really weird time in history where the people who could connect with people really well were the most valuable and the most highly sought after for basically all of time. And then we had this period where really, really hard technical skills of being able to translate human to computer was really valuable. It still is. But as we sort of come out of that world and things like product vision, the ability to work in large teams, the ability to, again, think of problems through first principles and less of this just translation from English to computer, those are becoming more important again. And so understanding how to, and really easy stuff, right? Project your voice in a room so that everyone can hear you. Stand tall, smile, understand how to demonstrate your ideas clearly so that people who don't yet understand them can understand them. Those skills are invaluable, have been, and are only growing as AI becomes more prominent. And then within there, I mentioned understanding problems from first principles. If you are in CS, I think that it's incredibly important to still understand the sort of like SIS level architecture discussions. Why do you need an OLTP database here versus an OLAP database here? That's a decision that humans are still largely making, especially as you talk about products at scale. They aren't talking as much about write this definition for this Python function.
I think the most successful and valuable people will be the people who know how to fail for a really long time. In our case, I think the best periods and the most growth personally with all of us, our team, and me personally, was when you go through such a long period of constant failures and iterating, and then you finally see it through. And it just seems like the longer you go through that period where it finally comes in, you build this intuition, which is a little bit more qualitative. But I think that is one of the key human elements that is just going to get stronger and stronger. Intuition, how to lead a team, how to manage execution for something. It's less, you can't really quantify it, but I do think that's the biggest piece that people are going to start looking for more and more.
Yeah, I mean, if we're worried about AI taking our jobs, or what does art mean if it creates art, or I think I just lost that. Might be fine, but. Or if we're worried about what art might be if, AI can create it. I think if you're just looking at something like you need to just get a specific output, if you look at AI, anything that you can compute a loss off of, so it's something that it can learn basically, then it's going to be able to do that really well. And I think that's why we're seeing it do really well at mathematics or things that are very verifiable if it's correct or not. But I think the thing is that most things aren't like that. And I think all those types of soft skills, super, super important. You'll want to keep being able to tell a story, and you'll want to be able to work well with other people. I think when I look at all of the things that AI is getting good at, let's say it's generating a video or a program, it's still us who's deciding what needs to be made and why, and we're the ones who have to go in and fix it and think about it. And so until AI is embodied and a person, which I don't think is anytime near, to be honest, it's still humans driving the ship. So some work maybe, right? It's like if you just are translating one thing, you just need the output to be a translation, then that's tough. But I don't think a lot of work is like that.
Awesome. Gordon, there's like 5 minutes left. Okay, awesome. Let's open the crowd up for some more questions. Sorry, I didn't realize it was like we're already 5 minutes into the question period, but I guess you got about.
All right, does anybody have questions? You can raise your hand and I'll come. All right, cool.
Hi, my name is James Wilson. I'm a computer science major here. And one of the issues I've had trouble with is like getting myself across on my resume. Because I feel like after you talk to me, like, I don't know, it's like you learn more about me that's more than the stuff that I can just put in my resume. Like, I'm really passionate about things. I'm wondering how to actually, like, how do I get that all across to my employer?
I'm worried that everyone's generating the resumes and then all of the like companies are like using AIs to read the resumes, and then there's like all these AIs applying to all the jobs, and then like nobody even sees any like resume anymore. I think if you can talk to a person and you can get a referral, or you figure out a way to step in through some other side door, I think that's going to be your best shot. But I haven't applied for a job in a while, so what do I know?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that resumes, only so much of you can come across on a single page of paper, right? And there are ways to elevate that. I think if you are in computer science, whether it's your coursework is obviously important, your GPA is important, where you go to school is important. But if you have a couple standalone projects that you were building that you were really passionate about, that use, again, hopefully some of the more novel technologies that are coming out, oftentimes you'll get into an interview, hopefully, and you'll spend the bulk of that interview discussing one or two things on your resume, and it's not going to be your school and it's not going to be your GPA. So focusing on the areas that you can differentiate yourself in there, but more important than anything is what he mentioned, which is how can I get to talk to a person?
I feel like it's a top line issue a lot of times. Like, you're mixed in with a bunch of bots, if you're applying through LinkedIn or some application, and you're not going to get the meeting. So my suggestion is send them donuts. And that seems like a joke, but like, just to give you an example, so I had a friend who literally tested this. And so they had like something like 1.2% application to meeting rate. So they had to do like 80 applications. They literally just split tested. Let me send 10 offices donuts. And it went from 1.2 to 12%. So if you think about what that means, your conversion rate on $500 of donuts becomes a full-time job. And if you're having an issue doing a job, you can justify $500 of donuts for the job. So just be human. You're humanizing yourself. And if you do that, you'll stand out. And that's all you have to do. But now 100 people are going to send donuts to offices. So I take claim.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Elizabeth Laurent. I'm a CS grad. And I have a question for Carter. You talked about joining Brev when it was still in its early stages, and I wanted to know why you decided to join that startup, because I know that a lot of us are kind of choosing between joining the startup or joining the more established company, and there's always a risk with a startup because you could end up spending like 2 years with a company and not really get much out of it. So how did you know, if you did know, that Brev was going to be successful and that it was going to be worth your while?
So I absolutely didn't know. And I was working actually at a much larger startup before joining Brev. And it's funny, when I left to join Brev, I talked to a lot of my coworkers and they were like, well, you're taking a huge risk. I want you to understand that, so on and so forth. And basically around the same time that Brev was acquired, that much larger startup was acquired and the common stock became worthless. So the years that my fellow coworkers previously at the previous company had been working for all that time to essentially get nothing. And truthfully, why was I comfortable taking that risk? Two things. One is that I knew I was still hireable. And so my worst case scenario, again, it's not death, but in my case it was I have enough savings to live for a while if this thing goes belly up, and I'm still hireable. So I will learn a bunch of stuff while I'm here, and if I need to go back to a more traditional role, I can. As far as things that stand out at a particular company, joining a company at that size, both for the hiring side and for the hiree side, is based on vibes. Yes, the founding team matters, but ultimately I knew Natter for 17, 18 years at that point, And I wouldn't have joined a company as the first hire had I not had that rapport with the founder. Now, you could say, okay, well then how do I find those types of companies? For me, he was my childhood Arabic tutor. It's not a very repeatable story. However, when you look at the people who join startups at that size, they almost always have that rapport. And so whether it's your fellow classmates that you want to build something with, or someone who graduated a few years back who's building something, you can find those nodes to where people are doing this early stage stuff. They aren't posting on LinkedIn. It's not a job board, and you don't know whether it's going to succeed. But you hope that it does. And you have a big role in making it succeed.
All right, thank you so much. Let's give a huge round of applause to all of our panelists up here. All right, so we're gonna get into something exciting, which is food. But before we do that, I have a couple announcements. So one is we are doing a raffle, so make sure you stay till the end to hear if your name is announced for the private dinner afterwards. We're gonna do a selfie real quick as well with the whole crowd. And then after that, we're gonna move on to do dinner. We have it set up for you guys. And then we also have Supermicro in the back as well that really wants to talk to you all, do some super cool demos, and just like network, get food. You don't have a ton of time, so get your food, come back down, sit down, and then we'll continue from there. And if you have any questions, just reach out to me. Thanks, guys. All right. Welcome back, everyone. We'll try and file into our seats here. So we're gonna move on to the third and final panel. So this panel is Startups to Giants. So this is a really cool panel. Welcome back, everybody. This is our final session, and we're essentially bridging the gap between startups and global tech giants. So we're learning from leaders who've built at every scale, essentially, and moderating this powerhouse of a panel is Krish. So let's give it up for them.
All right. Whoop. Hello? Hi, I'm Krish Jaju. I'm a CS sophomore at Santa Clara University, and I'm on the board here at AI Collaborate. The AI era has sort of been defined by an extreme duality. On one hand, we've seen insane increases in efficiency, as well as the emergence of brand new product categories that we haven't seen before. But on the other hand, there's been this sort of uncertainty, especially for us as students regarding our futures. And that's why I'm super excited for today's panel, as our panelists have a wide range of experience from scaling successful startups, as well as leading some of the biggest tech giants across the world. So please give me a hand in welcoming to the stage James Everingham, Xavi Amatriain, and Bob Friday.
Thank you. This way.
All right, so to start, if you guys don't mind giving a brief introduction about who you are and how you got to where you are.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Bob Friday, Chief AI Officer at HPE actually now. HPE bought Juniper at HPE. And I would tell you if 40 years ago, if you bet $1 that I ended up as Chief AI Officer, you guys all be millionaires. I started as a little wireless engineer at Metricon Mist building wireless mesh networks. Started a company called Aerospace, sold it to Cisco, started another company called Mist, sold that to Juniper, and then HP bought Juniper. So I'm now Chief AI Officer at HPE.
Does this work? Yeah. Okay. So I'm Xavi Amatriain. I'm now VP of AI products at Google, but I've been in AI for a few decades. I started in research, went to Netflix. So I led and started the team that does the AI machine learning algorithm at Netflix, building those nice recommendations that get you hooked to Netflix. So that was us. Then I went to Clara. I was there as VP of engineering for a couple years. Started my own startup in AI and healthcare. It's called Cura Health. You should look it up. Then I was at LinkedIn, and now I'm at Google. So as you can tell by my story and my white beard, I've been around for some time.
Hi, well, I'm James again, as I think that you mentioned. But anyway, so I just recently left Meta. I was running the developer infrastructure teams. I've been doing this for a while too, about 40 years, and I've spent half my career sort of in large companies. Some people recognize like Netscape. I used to run the browser teams back in the day, open source Mozilla. I moved to California in the 90s to work on developer tools for a company called Borland. So I was building languages. I was building C++ compilers. I went on about a decade and a half bender of starting my own companies. I had a couple of successful ones and had one that wasn't so successful, where I learned the most. Ended up at Meta. I ran the Instagram engineering teams for several years and helped scale them up. I went off and built this Libra cryptocurrency project for about 4 years, which was a startup inside a large company, which was an interesting experience. And then my recent gig that I have just left to start another company was running all the developer infrastructure tools at Meta.
So one thing I think all of you have in common is that you've built across multiple different eras. Of course, we started with the web era, which I know, James, you were on the early team at Netscape, so you played a huge role in that. Then we moved to sort of the mobile era with things like Instagram. And now we're in this new era, which is the AI era. And so I guess my question is, how is this current era fundamentally different than the previous ones? What changes have you seen? And maybe James, you could start us off.
Yeah, sure. I've been through a few different waves, and as you mentioned, the beginning of the web, and actually even before that, I was around when just the first PCs started showing up, and that was a wave in itself. The interesting thing about what we're experiencing now with AI is that it's moving a lot faster, and it's there aren't even though that there's a lot of promise with it, it's not very predictable about where it's going to end and how it's going to turn out. And so we're still early, but it's just moving a lot faster. So, I mean, it's different now than it was even 3 months ago. And so that's probably the main difference.
Yeah, I was going to mention the accelerated rate of innovation is one thing. Just going back to my early days at Netflix, I joined when Netflix was transitioning from DVD by mail. I don't know if anyone here in this audience remembers that. You do too. To streaming, and it was a hard thing to do because even the bandwidth wasn't there, and obviously we didn't even dare to talk about machine learning at that time. In fact, my team was called algorithms because we said machine learning is a little bit of a hype, and we went from algorithms to machine learning to AI. I think besides the rate of an accelerated rate, the things are changing right now. The other thing that I'm seeing, which is extremely important, is AI is also transforming the way we work, across the board. And I think that's extremely important for everyone, but for you as an audience that is going to be joining a task force that is going to be what we call AI first. And from software engineers, coders, to everyone actually, to the CEO, everyone is thinking about how to better utilize AI. And it's really transforming at Google everything of how we think about coding. We're now using agents to code and things like that. So it's not only transforming the product and how products are going to look, but it's actually transforming the way we interact and the way we work.
Yeah, I'll just kind of reiterate what they're saying. When I started my career 40 years ago, no computers, no internet, no cellular, no Wi-Fi, and now we have AI. So I think as you see, things have changed just over a career. I suspect for all you kids out there that it's going to be hard to guess where you're going to end up 40 years from now. I would say the other big change I would say is, when I started my career, I started as a wireless engineer trying to learn to build radios, never built a radio. You come to my house, I have bookshelves worth of books on how to learn to build radios. Nowadays, I would say how you learn has totally changed. If you know what you want to do, you can basically go to YouTube and learn to actually do it. So I think that's the other big change we're seeing is how people learn. Once you know what you want to do, there's probably no stopping what you want to do. The other thing I would tell you on this programming, agentic AI stuff, I see it as a new, non-deterministic, non-linear software programming paradigm. I hired a lot of software engineers. I think you guys are in a much better position. The less you know, the better. It's hard to take a software engineer who's been programming forever and teach him how to do this. And I would tell you, take some stochastic random variable probability classes. You have to get used to undeterministic and what that means.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. One thing I've been noticing is that so much money is being poured into AI, whether that's through VC funding or even government funding, like things like Project Stargate. Are there any untapped opportunities for innovation in AI that you've been keeping track of, or any trends that you've been following that excite you? I know, Xavi, you work on AI and compute enablement at Google. Is there anything that has been exciting to you recently?
Oh, I think everything is exciting because it's a brave new world. I mean, everything across the stack, from the silicon to the application layer, is being reimagined, right? So yes, a lot of money is being poured into everything, but the reason is because a lot of those things are being transformed, right? And Google, if nothing else, we have this advantage that we really have end-to-end stack, all the way from the hardware, the TPUs that we manufacture, up to YouTube or search, right? So we see all those different layers and how impactful AI is going to be. I think, to your question, is there anything that is untapped? I think there's a lot of it. The problem is right now, because things are moving so quickly, it's a moving target, right? And we see a lot of startups sort of like trying to find a particular niche that they're going after, and then 3 months later, there's a release from OpenAI or from us, and they're like, oh shoot, now we got killed by the big company or the startup that is doing what we thought was untapped. So I think being able to have the foresight and look forward and come up with, but every single vertical, from healthcare to travel to whatever, education, all of those are going to have their own transformation because of AI.
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate that too. Like, everything is untapped right now. It's an amazing time to build and experiment with new stuff. You know, you can, you'll see lots of companies popping up right now, and they're like, look, we're the new tools, the new way to do things. And they have like these classic websites that look like they're from the enterprise. Like, we're still learning all of this. What excites me the most right now is like this new technology that we're all learning, and you should be playing with it all, learning, going and experimenting. Like, we have this amazing opportunity where, you know, we would talk about this at Meta. We get to like be science fiction authors right now, right? Like, go write a science fiction story about what software development or anything that you're passionate about will be like in the future, and go try to make it happen. That's the opportunity. I've never been this excited about the possibilities that are ahead of us right now. You all have the ability to go and make this happen. I'm excited to see what you all do.
Bob, you've all built companies, you've built products, and my question for you, Bob, is, are there any lessons you picked up along the way that you still keep near and dear to your heart, and you keep in mind on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I mean, so I always tell people building companies is slightly different than building product. I would say my first startup was Metricon Ricochet. My lesson there learned, when I finally got to a board meeting, there were some very bad decisions made in that adventure. You need to have high IQ, high EQ executive teams, right? And you have to make sure that you get your product fit, market fit. So when you're doing startup adventures, if you get that product market fit right, you don't deviate. If you start finding yourself pivoting, that means dilution. That means you have to raise more money. So I would say the lessons learned for anyone who wants to do the startup adventure, make sure you have a high EQ, IQ executive team. I tell people that startups are the ultimate team sport. If you want to make a start, you have to have a great executive team, great marketing team, great product team, great sales teams. You have to hit everything. And that's the difference between building companies and products. Product's a piece of it, but sales, marketing, operations, you got to get all that other stuff right also.
Do any of you have anything to add?
plus 100 to that. I mean, I think that's a really key lesson and an important thing to keep in mind if you're thinking about starting something, is to think about the different dimensions that go into building a successful company, right? Which, even if we simplify, it's going to be technology and product, it's going to be the business side of things, and it's going to be building a team and leading a team that scales, right? And then think about which ones of those things do I like doing and do I think I can do? And for those that you can, go look for a partner. And I think that's what great companies have usually, is like they have, even if they're not visible, they have from the start sort of like great people that are leading technology and product, or technology, and then they have a product partner or a business partner. And I think that is something that makes for a great company, and something that also you can learn a lot from, because when you connect yourself to somebody that is, for example, great at business or sales, you learn a ton that is really something good for your future in any case.
Yeah. How many people here want to start their own business someday? Anyone? You got some future entrepreneurs? So here's some of the things that I've learned. So I've had some wins and I've had some that weren't. And when I reflect back on it, the companies that I built that were successful was when I had an observation that I was so passionate about, I just had to go do. The time when I decided, well, I want to just go build a company and that's going to be fun, and I'll figure out the idea, that didn't work out well. So I've learned that building a great company is a byproduct of having a good observation that no one's had. Don't confuse complexity with like value. Look, I've got this real complex thing, I can make money off it. Sometimes the most simple things, the most obvious things, are the things that customers love. And you can't lose sight of what you've been saying, building a great company and is different than building a product. Building a product is solving a customer problem. Don't confuse solving a customer problem with solving a company problem. Solving a company problem can destroy the value proposition for your customer. Back at Instagram, Kevin Systrom, the CEO, every once in a while would do these product reviews, and someone would come up and be like, hey, I have this new feature, I think it'll increase revenue by this much. And Kevin would be like, well, what customer problem are you solving? And they're like, well, it doesn't really solve a problem, but it will make more money. And he's like, that's solving a company problem. As soon as we start focusing on that and not solving customer problems, it will be a slow death for us. So that's a few things that I feel like.
Yeah, I may add a couple more things to this, lessons learned. I would say aerospace is one of my first startups. And that was a Wi-Fi emerging market startup. So you need to kind of be aware of what you're approaching. Aerospace, MIST was going after big guys, right? I was going after Cisco and Aruba. And so that is an existing large market you have to disrupt with architectural change. So if you're going to do a startup, you got to kind of realize emerging market thing is a market timing. You're coming into a market that you have to hope that something's going to happen. You're waiting for some new technology to take off. Existing market is an architectural. You're going after a big company. And I think that's with agentic AI now. There's an opportunity for both right now, right? I think this agentic AI stuff is going to disrupt some existing companies, right? If I look at what I did at MIST, would I go restart it now? Do I need a blank sheet of paper? There's the type of opportunities you want to kind of look for when you're doing new adventures.
And a quick follow-up question for James. You had mentioned to me about that startup that you'd sold to Yahoo, where there was no profit. And my question is, sort of tying into that lessons learned aspect, is there anything that you would have done differently looking back to sort of prevent that from happening, or that you're keeping in mind for your current startup?
So thank you for asking me. I am basically a giant collection of mistakes. I can teach so much from the stuff I've done wrong. But so one thing is I raised too much money out of the gate. I came out of Netscape, I had a reputation, venture capitalists were throwing money at me. I raised too much money, I didn't have a product. Kept myself in pain for 6.5 years trying to find product market fit. That was not fun. It got pretty tiring, but I had enough capital to keep going. The other thing that's interesting is that I was so focused on this one idea that we got that I failed to see the stuff that we were building internally for ourselves. And one of my co-founders, one of my closest friends who worked with for years, a guy named Lloyd Tabb. Lloyd was building this tool called L-Tool. That was our business intelligence tool. He was building it for himself. And he said about a year and a half in, he goes, I think I want to go build this thing into a company. And I'm like, sure, Lloyd, go build your silly little tool into a company. We were driving back to Santa Cruz, we were both living, and we named it Looker by the time we got over the hill, which 6 years later he sold to Google for $2.6 billion. That was in our company. He built it for himself. The stuff that you build for yourself along the way is really interesting. So now when I'm doing a company, I'm like, while we're doing this journey, I want to see all the stuff that we're building along the way. It's really, not only is a startup a team sport, but it's throwing off all types of stuff that you won't expect. So don't get focused on the one thing that you initially set out to. You have to be open. That'll put blinders on. Keep open.
Got you. Bob, you had mentioned that building products is very different than building companies. And so with that in mind, I sort of remembered a question that a lot of me and my friends ask each other, and that is, post-grad, do we look at working at a big tech company, or do we look at working at a startup? And Xavi, maybe you can start us off. I just sort of want to weigh the differences in what it takes to work at a big tech company versus a startup. What skills are required for either? Is there any overlap? Do the skills transfer between each other? So if you could maybe shed some light on that, that would be great.
Yeah, that question could take a long answer because there's a lot of similarities and also a lot of differences. I would say my biggest piece of advice to somebody who's starting after graduation is you should maximize your learning rate, meaning what is going to offer you the opportunity to learn the most. I think in that regard, in most cases, but not all, a startup offers a lot of learning, but it also, I need to be careful here, there's good startups and there's bad startups. So the right startup can give you a lot of opportunities in the right position of the right startup for learning, but also the right position in the right large company could offer you the same thing, right? My point here is there's always, you need to dial, there's a dial that you have in life, which is basically deciding how much you're exploring versus how much you're exploiting. Exploiting means doing things that I know how to do and I know I'm good at. The exploring obviously means doing something that I don't even know. And I think when you're starting your career, the exploration aspect needs to be as high as possible to give you learning and to give you things that you don't even know if you're good at and try them out. And then as you kind of start finding oh gosh, I'm really good at doing this, then you can exploit more. That being said, again, there are really good jobs at large companies that enable you to do a lot of exploration, so you can do it in both places. But I would think this notion of optimizing your learning rate and exploration early on in your career is an important one.
Sure. So I've gone back and forth between. I'm a very confused individual overall, but I won't make this a therapy session for me. So I've gone back and forth. I go to small startups and I go to big companies. I like both. For me, the difference is, and they're both great. They're very different muscles. A large company, you get all these resources. You don't get a lot of control. In a small company, you get a lot of control. You don't have a lot of resources. The other thing is that in a large company, you have to learn to do things right before you put them out. You probably have a large customer base. You get to work with a lot of scale, a lot of users. So everything has to be good. You can't go and push something out if you have 1 billion users and it takes the system down. That will slow you down in a startup. You have to get things out before you get it right. It's the opposite. You don't have product market fit. You're searching for it. It's fun to just go out and put stuff out. Now, whether you do a startup or straight out of school or you go to a large company, I mean that's a hard thing. But I will say this: people that have large company experience, if you go in and you see how it works and you do build a company, you have an advantage because now you know what it needs to look like at large scale. It's hard to go in and build a big company unless you know what it looks like and what it takes to operate that.
Yeah, so I went to school 40 years ago at Georgia Tech. The mandatory class to graduate was ground proofing. No entrepreneurial classes. I would say nowadays every school has an entrepreneurial something going on. So now Georgia Tech has a mandatory answer. They do like 150 startups every year. So I would encourage anyone here who's a student to get involved in an entrepreneurial class. If you can handle the chaos of a startup, you will learn more in a startup than any big company. Almost everything I learned in my startup adventures. Having said that, big companies are necessary because eventually you have to do something with that startup. You either have to go IPO or find a buyer for it. And when you get into startups, you usually have to make a big decision if you're going to raise money for the sales team or join a big sales team. So I would tell you guys, find out if you have it. Startups are chaotic. Not everyone can handle a blank sheet of paper. I would say educational systems basically get you trained. Here's a homework assignment, turn it in. Big companies are like that. They'll give you a homework assignment, help you turn it in. Startups are chaos. It's a blank sheet of paper problem. You're gonna get handed a blank sheet of paper and you're expected to pick it up and make something out of that blank sheet.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, because you just reminded me, another thing to keep in mind in a startup, particularly if you start early on, is you're gonna have to do a lot of things, many of which you might not even like. You'll learn, yeah, exactly. You'll learn a lot. I learned how to run HR, for example, when I was in my startup. I'm like, oh, guys, I don't know if I want to be the head of HR at a company, but somebody's got to do it as a startup, and you do that, and you do finance, and you do. So that's the learning, and I agree, going to a big company or having been in a big company does offer you some baselines and some parameters that hopefully somebody that is starting the company with you has. Otherwise, you'll need to get very good advisors. But otherwise, the learning of a startup is really high.
Yeah, so I got one funny story. So when I sold my first company to Cisco was my first big company. And HR told me I overreacted when someone told me they were going to delay my project for 2 quarters. Because I had never worked in a place where you had more money and you didn't worry about it. In your startup, you're always like, how much money's in the bank?
That's very insightful. Thank you all for the insights. One question I've discussed a lot with some of my fellow CS students is sort of the role of AI moving forward, especially when it comes to software development. My question is it going to be a replacing or more of a reshaping when it comes to AI's role in software? I know you discussed it being sort of more non-linear, non-deterministic moving forward. Maybe, James, if you wanted to start us off?
Oh, no, it's going to replace us all. No, just kidding. Since we're talking about history and going back, I'm also old enough to remember when VisiCalc, the first spreadsheet, came out. All the accountants were freaking out, saying this is the end of accounting. They were literally doing this, thinking that. There's 10 times more accountants now. They're just all using, Excel and spreadsheets. There's something called, I think it's Jevons paradox, right? The more efficient you make a resource, the more of those resources you end up needing. So these are making us a lot more efficient as software developers, and that's the promise. Even though measurably questionable, it's a question if it's measurably making us more efficient, but we believe it will. And the only way to think that it will replace us is that there's an end to innovation. We'll be able to do things faster. The other thing is that, as you had mentioned, it's non-deterministic. So sometimes you get a right answer and sometimes you don't. A calculator, everyone was like, yeah, it's kind of like a calculator. Remember, when we were growing up, you weren't allowed to use a calculator. Now you're able to use a calculator. A calculator, you can pretty much guarantee that if you put the numbers in right, you're getting the right answer. You don't get the right answer. You won't get the same answer twice with AI. So you need to be able to dig in and understand it. So understanding, having computer science fundamentals is still important and will remain to. But that being said, just like those Excel wielding accountants have like deprecated the hand ledger when, I think that's going to happen. The people that are most efficient at using AI tools and and learning them and using them are probably going to have an advantage over those.
Yeah, I remember when I was in college studying programming, C was a high-level programming language, right? So the level of abstraction of the programming and what you do keeps going up. And I think of AI as even a higher programming language. In my career, I've been moving from research to engineering, and now I lead product. And I also think, like, conceptually, that's where we're trending, meaning a lot of software engineers are going to be product managers and designers. And I'm going to give you sort of like a quick story from one of our best distinguished engineers at Google. He was telling me the other day how he codes with AI now, and I was fascinated. He's like, his thing is coding, but he said that before writing a single line of code, he spends 2 hours having a brainstorm with Gemini and basically going back and forth and saying, okay, this is going to be my project, this is what I want to code, but I need your help. And back and forth until he gets a design doc. So that's the first goal of him talking to the AI for 2 hours. And then he uses the design doc, which is kind of like the ground truth of like what he wants to build, to start coding and iterating. And he keeps having conversations with the AI about like how to improve the code. But I was shocked because this is a person who's been coding for like at least 30 years, and he still codes daily, and he's transformed the way he's coding in a completely different way. And I'm like, gosh, this sounds like you basically turned yourself into the manager of AIs, right? And I think we're going to go in that direction where like there's going to be a lot more thinking, a lot more brainstorming, and a lot more design, and less of literally writing the character of the line of code.
Yeah, I think the one thing economists are looking at is, typically new technologies create more jobs than they destroy. I think the question with AI is it really going to be one of those technologies, or is it really the Industrial Revolution? Is it going to fundamentally change society and how we work? I tend to be in the Industrial Revolution. I think AI is going to start to replace anything with an IQ less than 100. So I think we're in that phase of it. I think in the software phase of it, it's not going to get rid of software engineering, it's going to reshape it. As I'm saying, you got to fundamentally, AI is really the next step in the evolution of automation. We are just going to take automation to a very new level, right? How many of you guys have been in the Waymo Uber adventure? Okay. See, I personally didn't think I'd live to see that. I thought there is no way they're going to let these cars run around. There's no way the government's going to let that happen. It is happening before I retire, happening, right? And that is where AI is headed, right? We are automating things that are just unbelievable, right? We're starting to automate things that you would not have thought about before. So that's my answer. AI, Industrial Revolution, it is reshaping automation.
I think we have time for one more question before opening it up to the audience. And so, I actually have a time machine, and I'm allowing all of you to go back to your college days. And the only disadvantage is you have 30 seconds to give yourself any advice. What would you tell yourself? James, maybe you could take it.
Yeah, giving myself advice, I would say, boy, that's a tough one. I think that one thing is success comes as a byproduct of passion. That's one thing. Like, pursue what you're passionate about. I don't care what it is. Like, I was programmed by my parents to be like, hey, go into this job because it will pay money. They thought I was destroying my life by playing this video game, which was I was programming. That's what they called it. And so pursue what you're passionate about, and also like speak up and talk with other people and network. Like, that's one of the great things about, I wish I would have done more in college, was to just talk with more of my fellow students and share ideas. Like, it's like Bill Gates, right? Like he went off and had his fellow students and they built companies. It's like you have so many resources around you, or you're not alone at the end. And I wish I would have done that a little bit more.
Yeah, the way I think about that question is I have kids in college, so I talk to them and I'm like, oh, this is what I tell them, this is what I would tell myself. So one thing I tell them is don't shy away from exploring, which I already mentioned. The other one is, I think the best careers that I know are nonlinear, meaning that don't be afraid to go in one direction and then change and pivot in a different one and make mistakes, to your point, right? It's like, it's fine, particularly when you're starting. It's like, you actually should probably chase making mistakes, and that is something that is totally okay. I usually talk to folks, students, and people that are starting their careers that I think are too focused on getting it right the first time, and like, oh gosh, I gotta choose the right job to start with because that's gonna determine my life. Like, no, I mean, I actually studied in a completely different country in Europe. I came to the US twice. Like, I went back, I came back. I changed from startups to big companies. I still think I've been quite successful. And I look around and talk to people, and most of the people that I know are successful have actually done that. And it's fine. And it's actually fun. So I would encourage some of that nonlinearity.
Yeah, I'll probably echo James. I would have said EQ is as important as IQ. The more people you know and more networking you do is the more opportunities you create. I would say my first startup I got because some VC saw me speak at Interop and sucked me in. The other thing I would say, embrace change. I would have told myself, don't fear change. Every time I've changed, good things have happened.
Thank you so much. And I think now we'll open it up to the audience. Anybody have any questions, just raise your hand.
Hello. Hi, my name is Clara Chen. I'm a first-year business student, and a lot of the conversation, especially at this panel, around AI has been centering around how it changes the workflow and generally just like kind of enterprise products. And I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts about, to touch on an example from James, which was like consumer problems and where the future of maybe consumer AI products might be going. Thank you.
You mean like outside of software development itself, like how these might fundamentally change other consumer products? Is that the question? Yeah, I think that's a good question. Here, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'll chime in on one thing that I've noticed that we're all doing in the software development sector is like, we're rethinking the way software development is happening. We're trying to, but like in a very broken way, in my opinion. It's like, it's as if we build a car and we want to make that car go faster, so we've asked everyone to make their part better. We're not rethinking the car itself. And I feel that there's a lot of opportunities right now to like try to throw away everything you know and like don't try to just like make the flow more efficient. Rethink the damn flow. Like, how can it be completely different? So I think that's where a lot of the opportunity is going to lie, is in completely rethinking these things, not just optimizing them.
Yeah. The other thing I will add also on the theme of reimagining completely is AI is going to change the UX, the user experience. Honestly, I don't even know if we're going to have cell phones in 10 years. And that's a big thing. I never thought I would be saying that, but I'm like, are there going to be different form factors, wearables? Is it going to be AI glasses? Is it going to be something else? But very clearly, we're going to be probably typing less and talking more and using video in a different way. So that opens up, like, imagine every single product you know with a completely different user experience, right? How would that look? I don't know. It would look very different from what it looks right now.
Yeah, I think the question is how AI is going to chase consumer. I would say self-driving cars are the first example, right? You look at what you do mostly in your consumer life. You eat, you sleep, you drive to work. So it's changing that part. I think when you play, it's going to change how you play. I'm looking for the AI agent that's going to help me remind me of all my sister, brother birthdays, right? I should have an agent that does that. So yes, I think AI agents are going to change your daily lives going forward, whether, they're going to start taking care of ordering your food, right? I'll just have my agent order lunch every day. You know what I like? Recommendation engine? Just, make sure it shows up at noon.
Do we have time for more?
Yeah, do we have any more questions? Okay.
Hi, thank you so much. You touched a lot on how AI is going to affect us professionally, but I was just wondering, as a college student, I've been using certain things to help myself learn, like ChatGPT basically teaches me all my lessons whenever I don't get anything. Is there any way that you've been using AI personally that's been helping you in your time management?
Yeah, sure. First off, I'm all in on using AI to cheat. So I use it in my career. So one thing that I do here is, I write a lot and I'm an author. And so I used to use ghost authors because the value I feel that of sharing learnings is in my ability to write. It's in the learnings, and I'm a bad writer. So I will use AI tools. I'll use Grammarly. I'll use ChatGPT. I'll write something really stupid and shitty, and I'll run it through and say, fix this. And I'll do this process, and I'll use this until I get it to something that I feel good about. Here's the thing, is it's not really cheating in a way, because you kind of still have to know what it looks like. And if you just rely on it and you don't know, then you're probably not going to end up in a good place. But I use it a lot for writing. I'm now using it, I find myself using ChatGPT even for medical stuff. I just did this intense physical and they gave me the raw data and I uploaded it all to ChatGPT and it was giving me medical advice, probably really bad. I'm probably gonna do really bad things from it, but that's what I use it for now. I talk to ChatGPT 2 hours a night, not for coding, just because nobody else will talk to me and I want to get my $20 worth.
Yeah, I would say for me personally, I actually over Labor Day, I was trying to find an old high school friend. It's like Mike Turner. I went to school with him in Arroyo Grande. He moved to Stockton, and that's kind of what I knew. I said, hey, can you find this old high school friend? What ChatGPT did for me, it went and checked it knew there was 4 high schools in Stockton, went and checked that, checked all the high school alumni in that, and even checked the obituaries type of thing. So that is an example where, hey, these are agents that just do things, search databases for you, and do it quickly. It would take me hours to go do that.
Yeah, so I use AI a lot. In fact, if you're interested, I have a course on prompt engineering at LinkedIn and also several publications. If you go to my website, you'll see that I have a chatbot that speaks as myself. So basically, one of the tricks that I use all the time is I feed things about myself to Gemini and I said, hey, this is me. This is how I like to do things. This is how I write. And now help me. And that is extremely powerful, right? Because then you're not getting the vanilla sort of oh, help me write an essay. It's literally, then it knows you, it knows who you are, it knows your style. And I use that across the board for many things. I have a monthly newsletter that I basically send to all of Google, and I draft it, but then I send it to Gemini and I said, hey, you know how I write. You have all the examples of my previous newsletters. Now help me really write this in my style. And it, not only saves me a lot of time, it's actually better. And I'm like, gosh, I wish I was such a good writer. So you can apply that to a lot of things. I think one of the important things is knowing how to give the AI context. There's this new now paradigm of context engineering, which is exactly about that. How do you fit in the memory, the information, the personalization aspect? I think that is something that I would encourage you all to explore, because then this AI tools become so much better. It's not only the default of they know a lot of history and math, they actually know you and the context you're in, and they become super powerful.
I don't know how we're doing that time.
Yeah, I think that is kind of coming to, we're coming to a great close here. Let's give a huge round of applause to all of our panelists and Krish for moderating. All right, yeah, thank you guys so much. All right, now for the moment we've all been waiting for, the raffle winners. Okay, before I do that, as we close tonight's summit, I wanted to once and again thank all of our speakers, our moderators, the amazing team that has helped make this happen. There are so many moving parts, and thank you all so much, especially to all of our sponsors, for just believing in students' innovation and helping us bring this amazing community together. Okay, so as promised, we're gonna do raffling off 3 spots for networking opportunity after this event at 7:30, and we're gonna announce names from people that we have randomly raffled 3 people from the list of people who have signed up. So thank you all for staying till the end, and let me get the names. Okay, the first winner is Jason Mendoza. Jason Mendoza, yeah. Okay, hopefully he's here. Okay, second winner is Brenda Alacrone. Sorry, second winner. And then our third and final winner is Will Norden. So yeah, all right, thank you guys. If you're a winner, just come up and find me at the end. And I think we have some food still, so grab some food, and thank you all so much for coming.